traffickers that they are, the child sacrificing operations that they have operated, and the fact that they have actually been stealing people's estates. It can't be hidden anymore, because what's happening, these are the things that you're going to be looking for. Those of you who have investments in what you call 401k plans, pension plans, so-called medical retirement plans of any type whatsoever, they don't want you to recognize that they have robbed them all. And these are the people who you think are government. We're not talking about, see what they've done. This is what they've done. They have deceived the people into thinking that when they see, as an example, members of the gangs of New York systematically murder innocent women and men on the streets and accost them and then charge them, who they attack, with battery and things like that, they don't want you to know that it is they who sent them out there to target the people. They want you to think that these people are operating outside, pardon me, authorization of themselves, when actually they send them out there. As an example, where you see members of the gangs of New York have been systematically, and they've upped the ante, particularly in the last few years, where they do the what you call unum sanctum sacrifices on the street. This is where they'll snatch people out of cars and stuff like that and kill them or try to smother them. It's kind of spoiled a little bit because people are starting to use cameras and take pictures of them. And the fact that they have cameras on their phones now, you'll see it taking place. You'll see it exposed more often, even though it happens more than what you see. But those purposes of those military operations serve the purpose of intimidating the people. But the point that it also is showing you is that these people are not your government. They are your enemies, attacking the people of the land, the peaceful inhabitants of the land, and then calling the people criminal for even having any semblance of trying to exercise a right. So back to the point. The proclamations and judicial notice are to put the hybrid Europeans who have been faking as Americans for years, that they are not to claim in any instrumentality of having power of attorney over yourself or over your estate, etc. And this is also why you see the entrance or the preliminary preface statement on the judicial notice. Dr. Naila, do you have on your computer, say, can you read the preface on the judicial notice so that the people can, most of them are familiar with it anyway, but so they can build some questions around it, etc. Because remember, they have a lot of trolls that they have paid lately, and COINTELPRO operatives, including boasting, actually making videos where they boast about infiltrating all the Moorish movements to undermine them, and also finding operatives or cooperatives among them to create schism operations, etc. However, on the long term, the consciousness on the people is actually greater than their power to continue their schism operations. Can you read the preface on the judicial notice, please?
Starting from to all elected officials. So
yes.
Top. All right.
Read from the heading down.
Oh, all of the
judicial notice.
From judicial notice.
Yes.
Judicial notice and proclamation to all elected, all non-elected, and to all appointed United States Republic officials, public servants, and officers of trust, etc., doing business as of and for the federal, state, city, and municipal governments, including their personnel, their contractors, and their other associate corporate entities doing business at North America, and to all third-party interlopers or contractors, etc., concerning their fiduciary obligations, their official oaths, and their duties enumerated in the American Constitution, adopted for governance of the United States Republic, all binding treaties, the established law of the land, and all statutory and civil law codes of the land, etc. Know all men by these publications and precepts.
Now, yes. And then you can read the first three, stare decisis. Now, keep in mind that no man nor woman in government holds that office without an obligation by oath to support and to defend the Constitution for the United States. And when they make that oath, keep in mind that their obligation is superseded by their obligations to the treaties that were set forth before the adoption of that Constitution. So when you look at their obligations, you look at all treaties in force, etc., to which they're obligated. And the more you do a little bit of research on your own, you can understand why criminals would not only not acknowledge and exercise their obligations to the treaties in force and to the Constitution, because they are in fact feudal operatives, and they are actually enemies of the state, pretending that the people of the land are enemies of the state. As a matter of fact, what they've done is flip places and tried to, and have been practicing slandering people who have been dealing with Constitution and treaty principles as if the people are out of order or criminal, when in fact they are out of order and criminal. And the things that you're experiencing today in the political forums, etc., whereas we've been telling these people, the people in general, about these things for last 40 years or so, is that we don't have to tell you anymore. And one of the things that I've had in conversations with people in these last month or so is that I don't want to get in the position of saying I told you so, but I told you so. But I don't have to tell you so, because now they're showing you themselves. And this is where we've been telling people for the last couple of years and emphasizing it in this last year, where all masks are off. So the circumstances of the political trade windows of the world and the credit windows of the world being frozen up is causing them to be openly hostile to people, etc. And in that process, they're actually exposing themselves. However, the other thing about the judicial notice that you need to know, and that I'm going to inform you of for those who may not really grasp where I'm going with this, is that those instruments were actually to inspire you to think for yourselves and to come to a state of mind of growth, expansion, and analysis that was needed for the time. However, in principle, while those principles are universal and why they have no what you would call chronological or time span closure, etc., for their established principles, etc., it is also to prepare the people to think in such manners as we are going to have to grow and expand into other dimensional levels of thinking, because the world is moving on. And so we're not looking necessarily, to establish or reestablish things as they were, in the sense that it would appear. It is actually to give the people a clearer view of the breaches which have taken place, and also establish with the people their responsibilities to themselves and to their progeny, to take responsibility of self-government back, as these criminals are de facto on all levels. And while it's been uncomfortable for people to study and to start to work to get their houses in order, it is important for you to recognize that you're not going to have too much of a choice to survive politically and economically, and in some ways physically, if you don't start getting your house in order. So the judicial notice is essentially, on a metaphysical level as well as on a political level, firing the feudalists, also telling them that you know that they're feudalists, and also telling them that they have no right of power of attorney over you and your estate, and also that you're aware that you have right of your own estate, and also that your activities revolve around a reversion of a state, and that it is established law and not an option for them to critique or to counter, etc. And all counters made by them and all rebuttals made by them are actually acts of misprision, sedition, and treason. Know that for surety. Interjection, Doctor?
Not necessarily, but we do get a lot of calls from a lot of Moors who just exactly, which is probably what spurred this particular class.
Yes.
In response to so many Moors who call after having sent their paperwork to those 7 places or sometimes even more, and they ask, did you receive it? They get back responses, no, well, we don't have it, or they get them, it comes back in the mail as returned to sender and so forth.
Now,
and they get up in arms, like,
yes, which
I need
means
somebody to help me.
That's not all right. So it's 2 things. Because this thing is bigger than, like, say, for instance, just like over the years, we have people at the House of Reawakening Minds. Over the years, we've had people come to the round tables, at my house and other places, come to New York, as we've done our classes in New York at the Moorish History School, civic class, etc. And then, of course, other venues. We've traveled around the country, at different colleges and different other venues, sharing with other people who are also active for the restoration of the estate, etc. And of course, in the process, you find, which is not an unknown factor, that almost every institution by program is infiltrated by operatives of the hybrid Europeans, which they boast of, if you get the point. However, what you recognize is that we have the unfortunate reality, whereas many people who become conscious don't really have years of background of studying both the anthropology, the epistemology, the cosmology, culture, jurisprudence as a rule, and which is also why the judicial notice is structured the way it's structured, because it's actually a teaching tool at the same time. Because in fact, in a rule of law, a notice doesn't even need to be that long. But knowing that many of the people have not had the what you would say, the conditions where they would be in a class where some people would be studying civics, like many of the Moorish Americans had not had civic instruction since, like, say, maybe the early 20s, when Noble Drew Ali set up the Moorish Temple of Science, which was a civic organization, etc. This is before the Moorish Science Temple of America in its, current iteration, political iteration. Then you all also know, for those of you who read the FDI papers, the infiltration problems that he's had since that time, since the mid-20s, etc. Then you had other organizations that had come about who were trying to establish or educational and erudition systems where the people could study constitutional enforcement principles, or what you call due process principles, and thus treaty principles that supersede that, because those principles of constitutional law actually come from fatwa or Moorish law in the first place, etc. And you find that the people are handicapped of not having the convenience of going to different classes. And many people have learned or heard about or had information shared with them, either through internet or papers that people have shared with them. And so they don't have a background. And so, but also what it indicates also is a lack of study. And so many people get paperwork, and because they've been programmed, because remember, this is part of programming that they've operating, because they're used to the hybrid Europeans sticking them with needles and sticking them with military pills, pharmaceutical military operations. And they operate from that mentality. All of our people have not shed that mentality yet, And then you also have the problem where our people have been subjugated by the John D. Rockefeller, Frederick T. Gates, mental warfare operations of the General Education Board, and have difficulty dealing with etymological cross-reference research and finding true meanings of words, etc. Therefore, not recognizing structures in contract law and, of course, treaty and constitution principles. And so this is why you often see people get the paperwork and then they'll start asking questions, and that's an immediate indication that, you know, they don't have a civic background. But we also have the unfortunate conditions where having to try to get the people or bring the people to a certain level of consciousness, not having access to what you call educational and erudition institutions. And of course, as you already know, whenever we had any established institutions to really serve our people, that the hybrid Europeans would bomb them. As an example of what they did to MOVE, who had a structured education system for their own children, so they bombed them. What they did in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where our people had the largest and actually wealthiest bank on the land at that time, and they bombed them. So, you know, you have unum sanctum operations that are constantly going on, and because they're warring against us. The unfortunate thing that you find is that many of our people are not aware that they're warring against us. They look at them as having skin complexion issues when actually they've been warring against us, warring upon us, which is a major reason why they spent so many decades disarming the people so that the people would have no defense. Now, back to the issue of constitutional principle, that is the pre-existing obligations that exist with these people who have been pretending to be government. And of course, they've been breaching that because, in fact, they've been contrary or operating contrary to those rules because they are de facto. So it is incumbent upon the people, nevertheless, to make those proclamations to the world, so that these people in the platforms of fraud that they have created and imposed upon both us and upon the world, that they have no validity in the trade platforms of the world, etc. So they cannot continue to build bonds on them. This is another reason why they want the people to think that they're going to get a benefit from these bonding systems, if you get the point, because people are not aware that the bonds are against them and on their backs, and is actually the source of their economic miseries, etc. So that's another reason for the proclamations, and that's another reason why, for those who really understand that these people are de facto, why they don't want those papers in their files. Why? Because it's evidence that can be used in international high courts of human trafficking. So they don't want that evidence in their possession, even though they're obligated by law to treaties that supersede even their obligation to the Constitution for the United States, which is why they disparagingly knock both treaty and constitution principles, of which by principle of law they're obligated. However, it's on you, the people yourself, to declare right, even if the hybrid aliens don't want to acknowledge it. They cannot say that you consented to your own subversion, to your own subjugation, to connotative slavery, which is what they're saying to the world. Because every time they trick you to sign things like census and voting in their platform, they're using that on the world platform, saying that you sanctioned them against your state. Because we got to remember that they're de facto. And you got to be clear that they are de facto. So when you participate in the de facto platforms that they create in the name of legitimate government, they use it actually against you. And then when you don't cooperate, as they're causing injury on you, then they send out the first arm of the military octopus, known as the Fraternal Order of the Police, to destabilize the families, destabilize the communities, and severely attack anyone that deals with treaty enforcement and constitution enforcement. And that is the misrepresentation and propaganda that you see going on on these what you call de facto attacks against any Moors or people of the land, not just here on the land at North America, but around the world, that stand on principles of treaties and constitution principles. Because in fact, they are operating absolutely opposite to that. Any other interjection, Dr. Nalia?
Well, you know, I'm deep into what I told you today, my latest read that I've had sitting on the shelf for over a year.
Oh yeah, about a year and a half actually.
About a year and a half.
Yeah.
And decided to pick this up and really kind of get into it. And in the which is, and some of the listeners have probably heard of this. And I don't think it's a banned book, but or is it kind of banned?
Put it this way. What you're seeing today, particularly on this land,
right?
Anything, any information that helps people will be attacked.
Wow.
Now, the issue, what you want to recognize is, and this is where our work has to come in, to aid in bringing the people to a certain level of cognizance and competence, whereas they can reasonably determine for themselves and not be in a follower mentality, but be cognizant and competent enough to recognize that they're being attacked by these people who they thought were legitimate government. Now, from the position of the hybrid Europeans, their political problem right now, which is how do you say, problematic with them right now, is trying to keep the people fooled in thinking that they're legitimate, and not figuring out that they're absolutely criminals, and that they've actually used people's taxes to actually hire private contractor, corporate entities, operatives to actually attack the people.
Right.
And this is what they don't know.
And see, but they have,
I
know one of my poems I wrote about their 1,000-year plan.
Yes.
So they have shorter term ones, but we can't plan for the next day, let alone for 1,000 years. But this book was written in 1998.
Yes.
And as I said, I credit Father Hannibal for turning me on to this book. I got it, and I'll be honest with you, because you see behind you.
We've been busy, and this ain't nothing. Look, they don't see these books or here, or in your room, or downstairs,
that's right,
or in the basement.
All the books there.
Yeah.
So,